What's up, America? So, tell me, are you tired? Tired of watching all of the charts and projections about the election that happened, what is it, a week ago now, 2 weeks? I can't remember. I gotta tell you, I'm tired of watching it. I'm tired of watching it because the results weren't what I really preferred, but it is what it is. That's what happens in competition. There's a winner, there's a loser, and sometimes the winner isn't the person you thought it was going to be. So Joe Biden, in all likelihood, is going to be the next president of the United States. Yes, it was an upset. Yes, I did say upset, a November Madness upset. And I could get into why that's actually the case, but we've got bigger fish to fry, as it were, because what's important now is what are the implications now that he has won. And we're going to go over that, as you obviously saw from the thumbnail on YouTube. We're going to be talking about the myth of the fair share, so to speak. But before we get into that, go over a couple things here. First of all, I've got some notes here because this is a pretty dense subject, and there's certain points that I want to make sure that I don't forget to relay upon you. Also, please, if you find this content enjoyable, useful, informative, consider subscribing to the channel. Hit the like button and also hit the notification bell so that you know when new videos are forthcoming. I'm also trying out a new way of creating videos. There's a lot of different ways to make YouTube videos. Some people just throw the camera on, hit record, and just talk stream of consciousness. Other people, and these are usually the videos that you see a little bit nicer, a little bit higher in video or film quality, if you will. They're typically shooting, getting their graphics, getting thumbnails, whatever the case may be, and editing that in programs like Adobe Premiere. That's really the best way to do it, but it is time consuming, and obviously that's not something you can do if you ever decide to live stream, which a lot of people are doing on YouTube these days. I'm using or trying out a couple of different systems this weekend. I'm using right now something called Ecamm that's supposed to be for live streaming, but also something that can be recorded as well. I'm trying to find something that's going to cut down the time it takes to make videos so that I can get them out a little bit faster for you. So in the comments below, please let me know if you can tell about the interface, how it looks to you. Does the graphics and things pop up in the way that's interesting and not distracting? Okay, as I said, we're going to talk about taxes. A lot of implications right now with Joe Biden becoming the next president. One of the biggest, of course, is going to be his desire to raise taxes, get rid of the Trump tax cuts. Now, some of that may change depending on what happens with the runoffs in Georgia. If the Republicans keep the Senate, then in all likelihood, there's not going to be a tax hike, or at least not one to the degree that Joe Biden would prefer. Okay? So let's talk about this. Taxes. Joe Biden wants to raise them. Question is why? And because of fairness, right?
Corporations, the wealthy pay their fair share of taxes.
Billionaires to stop being freeloaders. I want them to pick up their fair share.
It is time corporate America pay their fair share of taxes.
Real patriots pay taxes.
Patriots pay.
Please, tax rate.
What are you going to say?
April 15th is what pays for our independence on the 4th of July. So if we don't pay our fair share on tax day, we don't have the resources needed for a good public education system, healthy families, safe communities, and a secure retirement.
Patriots want to pay their fair share because we don't want to live in a country with a few rich people like us and lots of poor people.
So patriots want to pay their fair share because it's the patriotic thing to do, and we don't want more poor people? Do you think that's true? I mean, seriously, did the Boston Tea Party start because the patriots in America wanted to pay a higher amount of taxes? That's not exactly the way I remember it in history class, but maybe I could be wrong. And I gotta tell you, I can't remember the last time I read about any country in the history of the planet raising taxes, and therefore that ends up making poor people rich people. I mean, I would love to see that, because if that was the case, heck, I'd move to France where the tax rate's like 75%, and there's still a lot of poor people in France. So, not exactly sure what these people in these videos are talking about. And of course, I tried to give a little flavor. We've heard this line from Democrats before. Rich people need to pay their fair share. Corporations need to pay their fair share. Implication being, of course, that people who have lots and lots and lots of money are paying only a little bit in taxes as compared to poor people or the middle class. I mean, after all, even Warren Buffett, the sage of Omaha, has said that he pays more taxes than his secretary. Is that true? I mean, we hear a lot of this rhetoric, but is that actually what's happening when it comes to the payment of taxes? Are people like Warren Buffett actually paying less in taxes than his secretaries or executives or other people who presumably make less money than him in his country, in his company? And I gotta tell you, this is what Democrats want people to convince. And they convinced a large number of people that, I'm not going to say they're ignorant, because I have friends that believe this and who I'm going to be sending this video to watch. Let's just say they're misinformed instead. And those people who are misinformed about the reality and facts have been tricked into thinking this way. This video is designed to clear up this mess, at least as it pertains to the idea and concept about whether or not the rich people and the corporations are paying their fair share or not. So, a couple things, okay? When Warren Buffett and other rich people say they want to pay less in taxes than ordinary people, they are being deliberately disingenuous at best and liars at worst. There are tons of different types of taxes, but when it comes to income, the two primary areas you have to think about are ordinary earned income. This is the type of income you get from a salary or an hourly wage. This is when you start a new job and you fill out your W-4, that would be considered ordinary income. The other way that you can get income in America, of course, is dividends, capital gains, which is usually income that's generated by an asset that you own, like, say, stocks, which is one of the primary ways that Buffett and many other investors receive their income. Okay? Now, here's the thing. Ordinary income and capital gains are taxed in different ways. Okay, let me bring up a chart here. Now, I want this chart to be nice and large, so it's going to cover up my face here, because I want you to see, what the rates are. Okay, so here's the tax brackets and levels for 2020. Okay. As you can see, you've got the ordinary tax rate income for people who, again, are receiving salaries, or if you're an hourly wage earner. This is in blue. And these are the different income breakpoints. So, for instance, anyone paying less than $9,700 ostensibly would have a tax rate of 10%. That doesn't really actually usually happen that way. Let me just move this a little bit, and I'm going to move over here to the side of the camera here. This is the one good thing about doing these things live, is that you can try to position yourself so people can still see it. Okay, so, and then in orange, of course, is dividends. And these are the tax rates that you would pay if you have dividend income or if you have a capital gain. So if you have stocks that pay out, say, $1,000 a month in dividends, you, depending on how much income you get from that at the end of the year, these would be your percentages. If you go out and buy $10,000 worth of stock, sell it 6 months later for $20,000, you've got a $10,000 profit. That's a capital gain. This is where this is going to be. Now, there are a little bit of nuances and obviously details that CPAs can do differently, but again, we're talking about just the overall general process. So let's take a look about Warren Buffett's secretary. It's been reported that his secretary makes about $200,000 a year as an executive assistant. Okay. Now, if she or any other executive assistant for a billionaire is making $200,000 a year, you look at this chart. Let me go ahead and make this a little bit lower again. You look at this chart. $200,000 is just going to be at the 24% rate. So you take 24%. We're just going to cast any deductions and things like that aside for the moment. You're looking at about $48,000 in taxes that they're paying. Now, if the billionaire, her boss, decides to pay himself in salary, then he would get charged an ordinary income tax rate as well. However, because he's the owner of the company, and because of the type of company it is, these CEOs typically, people like you are billionaires, typically pay themselves in a different way. So let's say the billionaire pays himself $10 million over the course of the year. And that $10 million is coming from either dividends or some sort of stock sale that he does. Okay, look at this chart. Anything over $510,000, $10 million is obviously a heck of a lot more than that. They would get charged 20% or $2 million in taxes. So, while it is true that their tax percentage rate is lower than ordinary income, they're paying $2 million in real dollars. Now listen, a lot of people like to bandy about percentages. Percentages don't matter because the U.S. government doesn't get paid in percentages. They get paid in real dollars. And so what actually matters is how much revenue in real dollars are they collecting from somebody. $2 million is a heck of a lot more money than $48,000. Okay? Follow me? So they are not actually paying less money than ordinary employees. Okay? Now, in truth, CEOs, people like Bezos, Zuckerberg, they don't usually pay themselves a salary whatsoever. I mean, like Zuckerberg for Facebook pays himself a $1 salary. He gets paid and takes income in different ways. Partly in the way that I just mentioned. They don't really pay dividends, but stock sales and other things. So because he's not getting an ordinary income, again, he's going to get charged a different tax rate than a secretary, a manager, a retail clerk, or what have you. Okay? So again, they pay a lower percentage, but in real dollars, they're actually paying a much higher rate of money. So when you hear about a huge stock sale from Ellison or Bezos or anyone, and that's like $50 million, well, you take $50 million and times that by 20%, and you have an idea of just how much in taxes they are paying. Now, the truth is, Warren Buffett, if he wanted to, he could pay himself completely in salary. I mean, last year, Warren Buffett is an odd example because the man is cheap. I mean, he just is, okay? So he pays himself about $100,000 in regular salary. So at $100,000, he's going to be right at 22% on the ordinary income level. And then he pays himself an additional like $274,000 that comes out of dividends, okay? And so that's going to be somewhere in the 15% mark. As the owner, he's more than happy, well, not happy, more than welcome to take his $374,000 and pay it to himself as regular, ordinary income. And if he did that, then he would be paying just around 35%. He decides not to do that. And this is the one thing that you also have to keep in mind when you're talking about rich Democrats who say, please, please tax me more. It's really easy for them to pay more taxes if they think it's the patriotic thing to do. They can fire the CPAs and take their $10 million, $50 million, $25 million in income, whatever it happens to be, and put it on a 1040 EZ form. I mean, like, it would be easy for them to pay higher taxes because they just wouldn't take any deductions and they would pay themselves in a regular salary. But they don't do that. So, again, disingenuous 100% of the time when they're talking about that. Okay? Now, here's the thing about this myth. There are two parts to it. All right? Let me just get this out of the way here. Okay? The first part is what we just went over, which is that how much you pay in percentages really depends on how much money you're making and how you pay yourself, okay? Owners, because they're owners, investors, because they're investors, they pay themselves differently. And as a result of paying themselves differently, again, capital gains or dividends, they get a lower percentage. Now, the question might be, why would it be set up that way? And the answer is relatively simple. To encourage investment. See, when you make money, you can do one of three things. You can spend it, or you can put it in hard assets like real estate, commercial real estate, land, anything like that, and the money doesn't circulate. It doesn't invest in other businesses. It doesn't invest in the stock market. And so that money stops flowing through the economy. If you want to incentivize people to save money and then invest it in either stocks for their own future, 401k for the future, in other business ventures where you might, invest in the business idea of somebody else. If you want to encourage that type of behavior, then the incentive is a lower percentage of income, or rather taxes charged against it, because you're taking money that you could just leave in a savings account and having it circulate in a more productive way within the economy. Otherwise, people would just buy bonds from the federal government or states and just get 3 or 4% tax-free and do nothing. Okay? So that's why you want to do that. And when you think about it, if you really want to get down to brass tacks, considering that when you invest money, it's coming from a pot of money that you've earned and already paid taxes on, technically, even if the capital gains rate is low, it's still a double taxation situation, okay? But there's a second way to think about this idea of tax fairness, okay? And let me kind of go over something else, okay? In 2019, the U.S. government took in $3.4 trillion in tax revenue. Okay, you see it scrolling across the screen here. $3.4 trillion in tax revenue. That's a lot of money. It's not nearly as much money as the government decides to spend every year, but still. So here's the question. Of that $3.46 trillion, what's the percentage of people, in terms of different income levels and groups, contributed to that $3.4 trillion, okay? And so what we're going to do is look at some charts to kind of break this down, because, you know, people like Elizabeth Warren, people especially like Bernie Sanders, they love to talk about the millionaires and billionaires, and they've got to pay their fair share and all of this. But let's take a look at what the 1%ers are actually contributing to the economy, or not the economy, the tax bill, so to speak. So I'm going to, again, scroll this up a little bit bigger so you can see it a little bit better, okay? Just move this over here. Obviously, this is covering my face, but, you know, this is more important than this handsome face of mine. So the top 1% of income earners, people who make more than $515,000 a year, okay, their share of the income tax revenue was 21%. Okay? 21%. So think about this. Of the $3.4 trillion that the government took in revenue last year, the top 1% contributed 20% of the money for that revenue. That's a lot of money, okay? Then you go to the top 5%. So you got the top one, then let's talk about the next tier, which is the top 5% in income earners. These are people who make more than $208,000 a year and caps off right about $515,000. They contributed 59% of the revenue of that for $3 trillion. So I'm going to, I'm doing this off screen because I think it's important, okay, because I want to get these percentages right here. All right. And of course, there we go. So let's look at that. Oh, I'm sorry, I did that wrong. Not 69, 36%. Sorry about that. So top 1%, 21. Top 5% contributed 36%. So 21 plus 36. That would mean the top 6% in wage earners contributed 60% of the revenue share. So that tax bill, the vast majority of it is paid for by the people with money. Now let's take a look at the bottom 50% of wage earners. These are people who make less than $41,000 a year. These would be the working class. In some places, if you have a really low cost of living, they might be considered like the working middle class. Here in Florida, $41,000 is obviously not rich, but it's not a bad living because of you know, how inexpensive it is to live in Florida. But they contributed 11%. Okay, so 60% versus 11. Which one of those is a higher percentage? Think about it like this. Let's say that you and a friend go out to dinner, and you guys are just going to split the bill between you two. The bill comes, it's $100, and you decide to pay $60 of that $100. That means you're paying the vast majority of the bill, and your friend can't come out and say you didn't pay your fair share because you're actually paying more than they are. Now, in reality, in America, since there are, obviously you can see on this chart, there are three other categories in terms of income levels and the amount that people are contributing, right? But think about it as a group. So let's see, there's how many in there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 6 people go out to dinner, all right? And the bill is $100. And one person, the 7th person, they pay $11.25. While the other 2 people pay $60. Why is the person who only paid 11 saying that you're not paying your fair share? That you should have paid a higher amount of the bill, even though they contributed hardly anything to the bill. You see what I'm saying? Let's take a look at another chart here. Okay. Now this chart is a chart that shows. Let me just move this over here as I'm reposition myself here. So you take a look at this chart. The bottom 50% is colored in blue. The next bottom 25-50% is red. The 1%ers and the ultra 1%ers are in this little, I guess, kind of pinkish color and gray. Okay, so this is, out of all the taxpayers in the country, this 1% right here, this is how much in total, in terms of a chart, this is how much, how many people there are compared to that. And then this is how many people in the next levels. Just pay attention to these two right here. Okay. Federal income tax share. This group, the tiniest group in terms of numbers of people, are paying a much higher percentage of the federal tax revenue bill. The ones next to them, higher number of people, obviously, they're the next ones. That bottom 50%, people who make less than $41,000, look at what they're paying. Hardly anything. Okay. And one other thing to keep in mind here is that this is being charitable, because the lowest cost people, once you start factoring into child tax credits, being married, and other tax deductions that the government just gives you without you having to do anything, the reality is the bottom 50% end up not paying any taxes. They end up getting money back. Okay. So when we say that the rich aren't paying their fair share, how much of the bill are the rich paying versus how much is everybody else paying? The bottom 50% are paying hardly anything. And again, when you factor in deductions and things of that nature, many of them end up getting money back. So they're paying zero. And yet these are the people saying that Jeff Bezos and all the other billionaires and all the millionaires have to pay more money. Okay? It's patently ridiculous. But let's take a look at another chart, because one of the things that people like to say, and they've said this for a long time, and there will be future videos that go into this idea of only the rich get richer. The idea that you have a group of people who are rich, and they're the only ones who continue getting rich, and that the people in that group never changes. That's not really true, but that's what they say. So let's take a look at one last chart here. Now, all of these squiggly lines here, basically, in fact, let me just make this a little bit bigger here. Again, let me scroll over here so you can see my face here. All right, I'm going to kind of look at this chart. So starting with 1980. Okay, so again, we've got the same color percentages. Okay, let me just move this down because I want this. So what this is showing is the percentages and the amount that these people have paid over the course of decades. Okay, so in 1980, the share of the top 1% contributing to the annual tax revenue, how much their taxes contributed to the tax bill and total revenues, this is where it was. Okay, you don't really need to, if you're going according to these numbers down here, 100%, they accounted to just about maybe just under 20% of the total bill. All right, so figure if, I'm not sure what again, to make numbers easy, let's say that the government at that time was taking in $1 trillion worth of tax revenue. Okay, that means the share that the ultra rich were contributing to it was around like $200 million of it. Okay, now this chart is a little bit older. It's 2017 is when it tops out, but look at this. See how much larger this bar is here versus here? And look at the bottom 50%. They weren't really paying that much at all. And you get up to 2017, the amount that they're contributing is even smaller. Okay? So over the course of 37 years or so, from 1980 till now, the amount that the richest people in the country have contributed to the tax revenue bill has steadily increased over time, meaning they are contributing a larger share to the tax revenue of the country than they were 30 some odd years ago. So the idea that they're paying less and less, as you can see, is patently false. I mean, it's just not true. And the amount that the poorest of us in this country, people making less than $41,000, the bottom 50%, is paid even less over time than in the 1980s. So looking at this chart, you can see that the vast majority of the tax revenue, when you look at just the 1%, the top 5%, and then move into the top 25, they're contributing the vast majority of the money. That's where the tax revenue is coming from. And if you go back to this chart right here, you can see that most of the taxes that the country is collecting is coming from the millionaires and billionaires already. So how can this be, right? I mean, that's really the question. How can this be, considering we're always told the exact opposite? And the answer to that question is pretty simple. The way taxes are supposed to work is thinking about it in numbers. The higher the income, the higher the dollar amount you're going to collect. Okay. So 20% of 100,000, it's only 20,000. But if you're getting 20% of 100 million, that's 20 million that just went into the tax coffer. Politicians on the left focus in on percentages because it allows them to paint a picture that makes people feel jealous and envious and ultimately bitter toward the rich, because they think the rich are getting away with something that they're not. And that's not really the case. What's happening is simple. The makeup of capitalism, the makeup of being able to be the owner of the business, the owner of the asset, is why wealth gets concentrated in their pockets and not regular workers. Regular workers are just that. They're workers. They trade time for money. Owners own the asset. They own the production line. And so they're making a little bit on hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of transactions. You look at Jeff Bezos. The reason Jeff Bezos, well, I mean, there are a lot of reasons why Jeff Bezos is the richest guy around right now. But part of the reason is he has a number of different services through Amazon that people can't live without. You know, back in February of this past year, I put a post in on Facebook talking about how I was going to kind of reduce my expenses and I was getting rid of Amazon Prime. And I got within 15, 20 minutes, 20, 30 comments all along the lines of, who in the hell gets rid of Amazon Prime? Like, people were literally making fun of me for the idea of getting rid of something that obviously everybody needs, like water, air, and love, I guess. When you have a product or service that millions of people feel that way about, you're going to make a few dollars. When you create a product or service that no one ever thought of before, and that they now can't live without, like, for instance, Kindle Unlimited. If you're not familiar with Kindle Unlimited, it's a service on Amazon where you have a monthly charge of $9.99, and you can download as many books as you want that are listed under the Kindle Unlimited moniker. People who love to read, it's like giving crack to a crack addict. People who only bought books once in a while, they still have that because they need it, and they didn't realize they needed it until it was created, right? Because before there was Kindle Unlimited, if you wanted a book for free, ostensibly, you had to go to the library, right? And you can only check out a certain number of books, and you had to drive there and all these other things. But when Amazon made Kindle and made the ability to download books as opposed to getting them shipped to you, and then made a subscription service where you get to download as many books as you can, and considering that many paperback books are like $7, $8, $9 anyway, 3 different services that people can't live without. That's why he's a billionaire. Gates did the same thing. Every billionaire in the country that's ever lived did the same thing. When you own, you make more money. Wealth gets more concentrated. And as a result of that, not only do you get to choose the way you pay yourself, but even if you're paying a lower percentage, you're going to end up paying a whole lot more money in the end in real dollars. I don't know about you, but I would much prefer paying 20% of $10 million than paying 40% of $50,000. You see what I'm saying? So that ends the myth, hopefully, as to this idea of tax fairness. At the end of the day, the rich are already paying their fair share. They pay a higher amount in total dollars, and they contribute a much higher degree of money to the annual tax bill of the U.S. than anybody who makes $41,000. That's been this segment for the Business Intercept. I am htier, of course, as you can see down the line here. Again, if this was informative, please hit the subscribe button and the like button. It really helps with the algorithm. If you have any comments or questions, anything that you want to challenge me on, put them in the comments below. And of course, don't forget to hit the notification bell so when another video comes out, you get notified. All right, now the question is, how do I turn this recording off? Okay.